Good morning. I don't know about you. I was watching the news a few days ago and I realized how I'd almost become numb to the horrendous statistics of people lost day by day to this horrendous virus. I thought that maybe I was too comfortable with this particular news program that I'd been watching, so I switched channel and immediately I was struck by how a reporter on the alternative channel kept referring to the hopelessness of this situation that we all find ourselves in. And it got me thinking about hope. And so this morning, I want to offer you this really simple message about hope. Of course, we all know what hope is. It's the anticipation or expectation of something good. It's deeper than just optimism. Optimism is just a tendency to believe that things are bound to turn out well. Hope is distinct from that. In fact, I agree with Václav Havel. He was a Czech politician. He actually ended up being president, but also a formidable academic, but certainly not a Christian. Václav Havel says that hope comes from elsewhere. Now, that's a very interesting proposition from a non-Christian or atheist, but we don't have time to unpack that here. But I agree with him. For me, the hope is the conviction that with God, through Jesus, and what we've just celebrated at Easter, his victory on the cross, with God, my life, your life, our efforts have meaning, no matter how this situation plays out. I want to think this morning about hope and actually how we can grow hope. The Christian writer Paul J. Mayer explains brilliantly that hope requires three strands: imagining, desiring, and believing. So I need to start by imagining that I'm a person of hope. I'm sure there's not a person listening to this talk who hasn't been inspired and moved by the story of Captain Tom Moore. I love the fact that this dear old warrior, after hip surgery, decided to combine rehab with a sponsored walk, the ultimate sponsored walk, you could say. And he declared that he hoped to raise £1,000 by doing laps of his garden. A decent amount, of course. But somehow, the idea of this 99-year-old World War II veteran who had broken a hip, walking to help other people, captured the imagination of people all over the world. And by the time this great man had reached his 100th birthday on Thursday, he had raised just over £30 million. £30 million. Tom has seriously overshot, don't you think? And here's the thing we can learn from Tom Moore. You can't do more than you hope to do if you don't hope. You can't do more than you hope to do if you don't hope. In his birthday message, which was wonderful and characteristically humble and self-effacing, he offered these words: stay home, stay safe. And then he said, tomorrow will be a good day. Now, how the heck does a 100-year-old frail fellow who admitted to losing his confidence a little after falling and breaking his hip, how does he become a national symbol of hope? So imagine that you, like Captain Tom, now Colonel Tom actually, after his well-deserved promotion, imagine that you, like Colonel Tom, have a hope that just doesn't give out, that you can't be stopped. You find a way. Imagine you are the kind of person who can look pandemic, isolation, fear, uncertainty, recession square in the eye, and you are convinced in your soul that with God at your side, better days are ahead. Imagine being so filled with hope that other people find inspiration and joy in just being around you. Imagine you wake up in the morning eager for the day. Imagine if when you go to bed, you can't wait for tomorrow because you are convinced that you will find God there. Imagine that your life is so filled with noble goals and wonderful hopes and significant plans, and you celebrate the victories, and you learn from the inevitable failures, and you never get stuck in the past because the future is calling you by name. When you do this, when you just imagine yourself as a person of hope so vividly that you ache for it, It makes you realize that you can grow toward it, even just a little. But when you do that, you've actually taken a significant step towards hope. Andy often uses this blessing from Romans 15, verse 13, and it's my prayer for us all this morning. May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him, so that you may overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. What a great prayer for us all in this season. There's so many passages in the Bible that we could use this morning as we think about hope. But I want you to listen to the words of the Apostle Peter as he frames hope very helpfully in this way. Some words from Peter's first letter, chapter 1, beginning at verse 3. Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. In his great mercy, he has given us new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, and into an inheritance that can never perish, spoil, or fade, kept in heaven for you, who, through faith, are shielded by God's power until the coming of the salvation that is ready to be revealed in the last time. In this you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while you may have had to suffer grief in all kinds of trials. These have come so that your faith, of greater worth than gold, which perishes even though it's refined by fire, your faith may be proved genuine and may result in praise and glory and honour when Jesus Christ is revealed.
Hallelujah, praise the one who set me free. Hallelujah, death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name, Jesus Christ, my living hope.
Those first few verses again. Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. In his great mercy, he has given us new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, and into an inheritance that can never perish, never spoil, never fade, kept in heaven for you. And that's why we can declare,
hallelujah, praise the one who set me free. Hallelujah, death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name, Jesus Christ, my living hope. Jesus Christ, my living hope.
I don't know if you can hear, but it's raining quite heavily outside now. It's a lovely reminder of God's blessing, isn't it? But it's dry in here. Jesus Christ is our only hope, and I love the way Peter reminds us of that reality. I don't want to particularly unpack that passage this morning, but I want that reality to help frame our thinking. Jesus Christ is our only hope. That's true, of course. But there is a role that you and only you can play in growing your hope. We all need to take responsibility for our hoping. Now, how would you define a hopeful person? I think a hopeful person is someone for whom hoping has become a habit. And you want to be around them in a crisis. Their hope is not fickle. It's like a thermometer just reads the temperature, and a thermostat actually sets the temperature. We need to be like a thermostat. We need to set our hope level. And we need to be intentional if we're going to be hope-filled people. And to do that, we need to be clear about what it is we're actually hoping for. We need to be honest about that. Let's think for a minute about King David from the Old Testament. Here is a guy who in the Psalms talks about hope more than any other person in the Bible. And I think his life models that idea that there are those three strands: to imagine, to desire, and to believe, that actually build hope. I think you can see it play out in his life. You know, as a young boy, he's the youngest of 8 brothers. The prophet Samuel comes and anoints David. He pours a jar of oil over this young lad's head, and he tells him that one day he will be king. Not any of his big brothers, but this tiny kid David, he will be king. And then the prophet leaves town and they all go back to work. They get on with their lives. And for who knows how many years, David just gets on with the business of herding sheep. And nothing changes in his life apart from one thing. David has future. David has a clear hope. Perhaps he starts dreaming of what kind of king he'll be, how he will unite Israel and bring the people back to God. David reminds me that I need to be intentional here. Ask yourself, do you know what you are hoping for? I mean, do you know what you hope to have? I mean, like, kind of house, kind of car, kind of job are you hoping for? I don't know. But also, crucially, the intangible things, friendships, relationships. Also, what are you hoping to do? Here is David as a young shepherd, but he hopes of doing great things as a king. What do you want to do? All of this matters to God. We need to be clear on this. What do you want to have? What do you want to do? And then thirdly, what do you want to become? Less fearful, more wise, more loving. Maybe this season is teaching you, like it is me, to be more patient. I need to be more patient. So what are you hoping for in your relational, physical, vocational, spiritual life? Great hopers have goals for the future. They don't drift. Maybe it will be helpful to write down what you want your future to look like. And when you've done that, ask yourself, what's one step you could take today to start moving towards your tomorrow? What's the one thing you could do today in your situation to start moving towards your tomorrow? We need to imagine and to desire, and we need to believe. One of the most famous stories about David is when a giant Philistine called Goliath had shattered Israel's hopes until David came. David says to his eldest brother Eliab, I'll have him, I'll take him. And he just gets laughed out of town and dismissed. Let me tell you, when you dare to hope, a lot of people will tell you what you cannot do. I don't know why, but there's something about having big plans and high hopes that just brings out the naysayers. Have you ever experienced that? But that does not stop David, and it shouldn't stop you. David just goes on telling other people, anyone that would listen, and probably quite a few people who don't want to listen, that he could take Goliath on. And eventually word gets to King Saul, who was also not hopeful. And he tells this little shepherd boy, you are not going to be able to go out and fight him. Every single soldier in Israel, except David, has lost hope for one important reason, and this should inform us. Remember, building hope involves 3 elements: imagining, desiring or wanting, and believing. Now, did every Israelite soldier imagine Goliath could be defeated? I assume so. Did every Israelite soldier desire Goliath to be defeated? Absolutely. Did they believe they could defeat Goliath? No way. That's what they lacked. That's why they didn't hope. They didn't believe. Why did David believe he could defeat Goliath when all those bigger, older, more experienced men told him he could not? He had built hope. David had learned hope. He explains to Saul that he's killed lions and bears and he's been guarding his father's sheep doing that. And that this big Philistine, who was well over 9 feet tall, was about to meet the same fate if the king let him go out and fight him. And this just wasn't immature bravado. Young David substantiates what he's saying. He knows where his hope is coming from. He explains it to his king. He says in 1 Samuel verse 37 of chapter 17, he says this: "The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." He knew where his hope came from. And Saul is persuaded by the hope he sees in young David, and David goes out and defeats Goliath. David wasn't just guarding sheep in his shepherding years. These weren't wasted years. He was growing hope. Friends, you can hear 100 preachers tell you that God is faithful. You can read it 100 times in a book, and you can understand the logic of it, but I don't think you'll ever come to believe it in your bones until you have lived it in your life. There's a big difference between hoping and wishing. Wishing doesn't cost you anything. Hope involves a joyful embrace of my responsibility. Hope pushes me, hope acts, and therefore hope grows. And I want to finish by just saying this. As we were thinking about hope, we need to be sure that we guard our ultimate hope. I don't mean your hope for tomorrow or next week or even when this bizarre season of isolation is over. I mean your ultimate hope. What is your ultimate hope? You see, the critical question is actually not what are you hoping for? It's what are you hoping in? The young shepherd boy David I've been talking about, he grew up to be King David. We all know that. The greatest king that Israel ever knew. And at the end of the most famous psalm David ever wrote, the 23rd psalm, is this declaration: "I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." What a declaration. I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Now that's not just hope, that's ultimate hope. You know, I recall when my dad was in hospital with a brain tumour. It was a difficult time, it was a horrendous time, of course. But I remember one day being at his bedside with him and another one of my brothers when a young doctor came in with the incredible news that my dad was going to be operated on. This critical operation that he required was now actually going to be performed by a surgeon who was regarded as the world's leading neurosurgeon in this particular field. Simply a pioneer. But obviously we were delighted, and all three of us were filled with hope. And the operation came and went. And then sadly the terrible day came when we heard that despite the efforts of arguably the best surgeon in the world, it hadn't gone as we'd hoped. And there was nothing that could be done to prevent this heinous tumour from ending my dad's life, which it did. When it's clear that you're not going to get what you've been hoping for, and that day will come, then the only question will be, what have you put your hope in? Here's David in the Psalms telling his soul, put your hope in the Lord. I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Maybe David writes this psalm as an old man, I don't know. Maybe he's looking back knowing that he got so many things wrong in his life. But here he is declaring the intention of his heart. I will dwell, he says. Not I hope I'll dwell, or it would be nice if I could dwell in the house of the Lord. No. He says, I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. I may make a mess, I might accidentally break stuff. I'll screw things up. I might get it wrong. I might get more wrong than I get right. And I know it's a pain having me in the house sometimes, but I tell you what, you are going to have to drag me out of here kicking and screaming. I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. It's Jesus' house. One day he will come back. One day the glory will return. One day he will stand with the crown on his head and set his house in order. And if you have put your hope in Jesus, if you make him your forgiver and your leader and your friend, then he is your hope, your fallback hope, your world-class hope, your ultimate hope. Because we do not hope in hope itself, of course. We hope in a person. Hope has a name. His name is Jesus. Amen.